Welcome to the British Chamber of Commerce Singapore's podcast channel. We're excited to bring you Season 3 of new episodes featuring in-depth content across Singapore, ASEAN and the United Kingdom. We've had some extraordinary guests on our channel, including Formula One's Claire Williams.
I'm a firm believer that any great team, any successful team has a great culture flowing through it. You aren't successful if you don't. So we put a lot of work into this.
Renowned mountaineer Kenton Cool.
That 2019 there with a client, a big storm came in and literally destroyed Camp 2. And I've got some video footage of Sherpas like trying to hold on to the tent fabric as it blows away. And
the Royal Navy's Commodore Steve Morehouse, commander of the UK Carrier Strike Group.
The squadron of F-35 aircraft we have on board is a Royal Air Force squadron, and the personnel on there are drawn from both the Navy and the Air Force. So what better way of showing just the efficiency and the joined-up nature that we now have.
And distinguished Sky News anchor Jeremy Thompson.
We had two little vans with satellite links, and we leapfrogged up the road to Pristina, the capital, throughout that first day, with non-stop coverage from basically inside a war zone.
We also sit down with the likes of TikTok, Twitch and Twitter and continue to bring you conversations around business and trade, leadership and people, sustainability, sports and arts and much, much more. Thank you, as always, for your support and we hope you enjoy this podcast. Hello and welcome to this latest podcast brought to you by the British Chamber of Commerce Singapore. Sustainability and education and learning are two core themes that run through the Chamber's activities, helping businesses and future leaders with content, tools and advice on how to support plans to collectively operate in a more sustainable environment and build a better world is something the Chamber absolutely champions. Today, I'm really pleased to be joined by Jacob Martin, the Deputy Head of College at Dulwich College, Singapore, who is also a member of the Chamber's Sustainability Business Committee. Dulwich College Singapore is determined to have sustainability at the heart of their education programs and also their operations of the college itself. In order to achieve their lofty goals, they have adapted a really great approach, which they have called the Compassionate Systems Framework. It's supported by MIT in Boston, and the framework is an innovative combination of system thinking, tools, and social emotional learning to support students and teachers. Today's podcast is great because I'm really keen to talk to Jacob so he can introduce the ideas which underpin the framework and the practical applications with students in the classroom. Jacob, it's great to have you with us. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a real honour to appear on the podcast. So thanks for that.
Oh no, a real pleasure. So I guess the first question is, can you just tell me a little bit more about the Compassionate Systems Framework? What is it?
Yeah, thank you. We should definitely start there. And I suppose the thing that I'd like to begin with is that the framework itself is relatively young. It's only really 6, maybe getting to its 7th birthday in terms of an approach which is taken in education. As you've rightly said, it's supported by our educational partnership with MIT in Boston, in particular their Center for Systems Awareness. It's still growing, it's still developing in the sense of exactly what it is. And therefore, one of the things I've been enjoying is the fact that it's grown and changed slightly in terms of what it really is. So now defining it it was challenging at the beginning, but I think we've cracked it and we know exactly what it is. And the reason it's challenging is because it affects every part of the college's programs, yes, but also our culture, our meetings, our conversations with students and parents. There are many areas where the Compassionate Systems Framework approach doesn't appear. And therefore, because it is so much part of the culture, it's quite hard to exactly define what it is. So I'll have a go, and you can tell me at the end what you think. But what we've come to really is that many educational institutions, particularly international schools, or even larger organizations like the IB, for example, the International Baccalaureate Organization, they have mission statements and vision statements, goals that they want to achieve, and they're often including some fairly lofty aims. like you referenced earlier, like making the world a better place. Is literally those words are in the IB mission statement, and certainly our own mission statement of graduate worldwide, or in fact live worldwide, is our vision of global citizenship. Now, global citizenship is a hard thing to define. For us, there are sort of 5 key lenses that we use. Some are familiar: sustainability, of course. We also have diversity, equity, inclusion, well-being, intercultural understanding. These are all lenses that we use in terms of, and also fairness, I left out. So those 5 lenses are the way we look at global citizenship, and we have this lofty vision statement. But what most schools don't have, and I think what we realize the Compassionate Systems Framework is that it is our way of achieving global citizenship. It is our way of deliberately teaching global citizenship skills in the classroom. That's what it is for us. Now, you can teach a child about sustainability issues. You know, you go and speak to our junior school students, then they care, particularly about the oceans, particularly about plastics, particularly about recycling. That happens to be the thing they're really looking at right now. But most children have an intellectual understanding of sustainability in that sense. But perhaps what's less obvious in schools is how you can get them to act as global citizens, how you can get them to take action, to be advocates for global citizenship when they graduate, when they become adults and go out into the world. And that's where the Compassionate Systems Framework comes in. It is a combination, in terms of practicality, what is it? It's important. So for parents to understand, if you are a parent out there listening, firstly, it's a set of tools that we use as teachers in the classroom. Okay, so it's a set of conversational frameworks or teaching tools that we use to unpack complicated issues like climate change, or like the outbreak of the Second World War, or like computer programming, whatever, debugging a computer program, whatever it happens to be. There's a set of tools, learning tools, which we use in the classroom that our teachers are familiar with. Many of those tools have existed for a while. They're from the Walters Center for Habits of a Systems Thinker, which started in the late 70s. So that part has been around a while, and it is all about systemic thinking and developing that. So there's that set of tools which teachers use in the classroom. And then the other part of the framework, which is equally as important, and I think which is what makes it really special, is that imagine you are a 7-year-old, imagine you're an 8-year-old, and you've just had a really, really good lesson about climate change, let's say, or pollution in the oceans, or whatever it happens to be. And the teacher has used these systems thinking tools, and you have a really clear understanding of the place that we find ourselves as a species right now. That is a pretty terrifying message to give to a student who's 7 years old or 8 years old. It really, you know, for many people, certainly for myself, I carry a sort of heavy burden of guilt of climate change and a fear for the future, and you carry it with you wherever you go. So once you've done that to a 7-year-old, you have to provide a set of compassionate practices around that understanding, that a child doesn't feel overwhelmed by the knowledge you've given them, doesn't feel, well, there's nothing to be done, what will there, you know, it's the end of the world type of thing. They have to be left in a place where they feel that they can be compassionate. By compassionate, we mean not overwhelmed by something, understanding of the emotions and feelings of everybody that's involved, for that, in that case, the whole human race, but be able to step back a little and take action to help people. So there are a set of well-being, mindful tools which are also used in the classroom in conjunction with those systems thinking tools that unpack those environmental issues. So it's a combination of those two things: the learning tools we use in the classroom, and then a set of practices around mindfulness, yes, with a small m, and also compassionate practice, which we practice with our students when they're experiencing these sort of lessons and that kind of thing. And it's though that part of the framework which I think has actually changed our culture more than any other aspect. Yeah.
And
what
how
do you think? Do you understand it?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And but from a sustainability perspective, I know the college is very, very passionate about this. I was extremely impressed a couple of years ago, where I think in your entrance space you have a live chart on the wall about how much energy each of the different departments are using, which was very impressive. I think that was driven by the students as well. So how does the framework fit with the college's focus on sustainability?
Yeah, so great question. So the sustainability aspect, where does that fit with the framework? Really is the systemic approach that students, they get very interested and excited by global issues. Yes, and that can be that can extend to Singapore, for example. So they become apoplectic about plastic bag use in Singapore, for example. So they become, they get very invested by viewing things outside of the college. But of course, as a learning tool, our own practice in the college is the most powerful for them, because they can connect directly to it. So, food waste bins in the college dining room. We recycle our food waste. We are lucky enough to have a full-blown industrial food desiccator, which produces basically fertilizer for our gardens and stuff, which comes from the food waste that is produced in the college. So examining that kind of an approach systemically, using the system thinking's tools, really gets the students to understand their place in the sustainability questions they're asking. It's quite easy for them sometimes to point out and look out and say, well, look at all those people carrying plastic bags around, isn't it terrible, etc., without them perhaps turning a gentle but a careful lens on themselves and where they are impacting the environment through simply their presence at the college. And the fact that they would really enjoy pizza at lunchtime and the energy required to produce that quantity of pizza. So it's that combination, I think, of the systemic thinking tools when applied to the lives they live every day, which really, even for our youngest children in Ducks, really helps them to, what we would say, make the learning experiential, make the learning have a personal anchor, a real world context that they can hang their ideas on. So that's probably the major part for it. The other thing is that we have a lot of students who are advocates. They're sustainability ambassadors. They are, they're well-being ambassadors. They're global citizenship ambassadors, or they're in the MUN team, or whatever it happens to be. So they're already involved in these areas, and they want to advocate for things. And the framework and the practices around the tools, and also around the compassionate practices, particularly the ones about how to have a balanced and generative conversation rather than perhaps like a shouting match or an argument or whatever it happens to be, then those aspects of the framework allow those students to see a way that they can advocate for the issues that they're passionate about.
And how have you seen the issues around sustainability sort of change in terms of students' minds over the last number of years? Have you seen the lens move onto sustainability?
Interesting. Lots of different things have happened in that area, and I'll talk about admissions and parents, and then also about students. Yeah. So fascinatingly, and for me, really, really positively, we obviously keep a really close eye on our market, on our admissions, and who's coming, who's choosing the school, etc., etc. And we operate in Singapore, as everyone in the chamber knows, in a very, very competitive market in all areas, but in education, certainly. Some of the finest schools, international schools in the world, are on this island, and it's a smallish island. So we keep a close eye on things. And at the beginning, one of the reasons where people were choosing Dulwich was our approach to global citizenship and sustainability. I think it was ranked 8th 4 years ago. Academic progress has been number 1, okay, and for since the college opened. And then you've got all sorts of other factors, sport and performing arts, and you name it. There are all sorts of different things in there. A Mandarin program, could be anything. And for an international school, with what we're hoping to do with the Graduate Worldwide message, simply that's not good enough, because you want people to be coming who are invested, who as a family are invested in this, because frankly, the sustainability issues are the to-do list for the entire world all the time, whatever your job is, whether you're a 7-year-old or a 70-year-old. That's our to-do list. Those UN Sustainable Development Goals, there they are. Okay, so every organization should be involved. And I literally 3 weeks ago received the latest survey on parent choice and all the rest of it. And global citizenship and sustainability, no exaggeration, are now number 1. They are number 1 for bringing new parents to us. And I can't help but think the compassionate systems approach has something to do with that. It's not just about me, it's about the whole compassionate systems team here at the college, but it does show in that case that parents care about it. They care about it now. They do want their children to understand these issues. They want their children, I think, to advocate for these issues. So in the student field, how has it changed? Not much, in the sense that students I've been in international education now 31 years, I think. And they've always been interested. I think that what has changed is sustainability was the focus before. Just sustainability, just recycling fundamentally, and pollution. Those are the 2 biggies. They were the 2 biggies for a long time. And I think that children grew up with those issues at the forefront of their minds. What's happened is that students now, I think, see a bigger picture. They see it more as a sort of an approach you can take to your whole life. Yes, so that it's much broader than simply just recycling. It's also your choice of transport. It's also your choice of food. It's also your choice, all the other personal choices that you can make in your life. That is a sustainability question they're talking about now, or thinking about now, rather than perhaps a little bit compartmentalizing it. So we certainly, for example, we have students who are involved in the performing arts, who are developing their own plays. They're producing and directing their own plays, and you might think, well, okay, what's the connection? Well, those students now have a sustainability element to their productions. They're asking questions, well, hang on, do we have to buy costumes? Can't we reuse costumes that were being used before? We are committed, for example, to no new piece of set. We're going to reuse some other piece of set. So students, I think, are now seeing it more holistically, seeing it more as a set of practices that they can have in their lives that make them more sustainable, rather than just making sure they recycle everything at home type of thing. So that more broader lens has come into play, I feel, with the students I've spoken to. We do still have the issue, unfortunately, I speak as an educationalist, that they start off as 3-year-olds and they are desperate to change the world, and they will go out and tell you about it. And they will tell you about it. They will tell you you're doing the wrong thing, because you are doing the wrong thing. They will tell you. And they carry on. The 7-year-olds and the 8-year-olds, same thing. They're shouting for the rooftops. They want you to know, and they want you to do something about it. They can't really understand why the adults have not done anything about it up to this point. And then you get to 13 and 14 and 15, and other things start to come in. And I'm not here talking about the joys of adolescence. I'm talking about exams. I'm talking about other pressures that come into their world. And what happens there is, rather than we find a whole year group being interested in these issues, it comes to a smaller, denser, more committed group of students. And our focus is on broadening that broadening that, making it so that all our students feel that their global citizenship journey is an important part of growing up.
Okay, so how does the framework help your students as part of that examination preparation?
Yes, that is the question that parents frequently ask, and it's a good question. It's all very well creating global citizens, but they have to be successful in the world. They have to be happy in the world too, and they have to have the skills that employers want them to have. And that part is really, really essential. So anything we do at the college has to support the teaching and learning program that we have. So why teach sustainability issues? Because that's important knowledge for everybody to have, important concepts for them to have. But how does it help the other way with those examinations which they have to take? So the key thing there is that if you talk to employers, and the Singapore Education Authorities did this amazing project a few years ago about asking almost every country in the world's employers, what are you looking for? What do you want from people who are coming up to university and eventually to your businesses? What is it that you want? Content and that sort of understanding of things is very, very, very low now. It's not really what employers want, but they do want, can this person communicate effectively? Can they communicate effectively ideas? Can they work in a group collaboratively, really, really effectively? So do they have those leadership skills? Are they critically minded? Meaning we're in an information overload world. The information is blasted at you from all directions all the time. So the skill of actually deciding what information is useful and what is not, identifying conspiracy from rumor and rumor from supposition and what are facts, etc. Those are the skills, or a set of skills, and languages and communication is the other, are a set of skills that employers really value. Yes, they also want you to know your chemistry or know your physics or whatever it happens to be, or know your history to a certain extent, but that conceptual picture of the world is more important to them, and the skills that underpin that allow you to be a successful employee are what employers are really interested in. So how does that link to the framework? Well, the compassionate practices include a few different components. There is some mindful practice. Now, mindful practice is all about you understanding yourself, and that is an important skill for all adults, never mind children. But it also includes something called the check-in, which is a very, very simple type of way of having a conversation, but it also happens to be a tremendously effective way to run a meeting. If you run a meeting using this protocol, it'll be a more inclusive meeting, it'll be a more effective meeting, and it'll probably be what we would describe as generative. So the ideas that might come from the meeting would be more generative. Students experience that every day in our classrooms. They experience it when they're working together with other students to solve problems, when they're collaborating on tasks, all of that kind of thing. So that element of the compassionate systems framework creates a very inclusive environment for those meetings and collaborations to happen in. And hopefully that's a skill they will take with them, for example. That's just one example. The other side, the systems thinking side, oh boy, I mean, that focuses on concepts. It's about what is the underlying big systemic forces that are in play here. You look at those UN Sustainable Development Goals, none of them are simple. None of them have some silver bullet out there that you can fire the bullet and that fixes that fixes goal 13, hooray. It's like that none of them are in that. They are all complex, multifaceted problems, which are fundamentally the problems that the human species have left. So if you're in a business situation and you're trying to innovate and build the next piece of technology or reform your shipping fleet or whatever, those aren't simple problems. They're always going to be complex issues. And therefore, giving a child a set of tools that helps them to create habits of mind where they are looking for the underlying complexity, looking for the underlying concept, will no doubt help them not just answer an examination question, because that's what the examiner's looking for, but also be hopefully more successful employees for some lucky company in the future.
So it's a very complex framework. It's doing some amazing stuff in terms of thinking. It's adapting to what businesses want out of future students. It's adapting to what the students want out of their education, the parents want for their kids as well. It sounds extremely complex to be able to implement a framework like this. What sort of difficulties and challenges have you faced in that development of the framework and sort of implementing it within the colleges around the world?
Thank you for that question, and also thank you for using the I word, implement. That's the first thing that I've learned. I've been involved with the compassionate systems. I'm lucky from the very beginning, since the amazing Peter Senge gave a speech at an IB conference many moons ago and changed my life. Anyway. The first school I was in, definitely, I went for an implementation plan. So I was like, okay, right, I need a strategic plan. I need to be these tasks by this date and get on with it like that. It was not a success, if I'm honest. I reflected on it afterwards and thought, yes, didn't do that very well. So I had another bite of the cherry in a school in Switzerland, which was a little better, but I made the mistake of leaving parents out of that conversation, which again, big mistake. So here at Dulwich, I've learned from those two previous incarnations of the framework, and also from the other schools around the world that are doing this in the region and more globally. And implementation can't be done with it. It can't be implemented in the sense that it's a cultural change that it needs to grow organically within the college. And I really appreciate the question, because most things, I believe, can be implemented, and if you do it the right way, they could be done. And so one of the frustrating things about the framework is that this makes it much harder. What we've had to do is start very small. We started small with only interested parties. Now, only interested parties, they came along and we modeled in the classroom. And that's me, deputy head of college, in the classroom, teaching the framework whilst other teachers are observing. So that shows an investment, shows modeling, shows I think it's important. Hopefully they see that it is actually transformative as an approach in the classroom, which they did, thankfully. Then those sort of flag bearers, as it were, then took the message themselves, not leadership saying, not Jacob coming in as the new deputy head of college and saying, we're a compassionate systems school now, people, go out there and I want to see it every 2.5 weeks on this, or I want to see it in the classroom, etc., etc. It was a few people went and spoke and said, oh, this was really nice. In year 3, I saw this with the stock and flow diagram. It was really effective. Why don't you have a go? I can show you how to do it. And that sort of percolated through a little bit, and the whole year group started to get interested. But again, very gentle. The why always first. Why are we doing this? Teaching is a very, very busy place. It's a very, very busy job. And teaching is also full of new initiatives all the time. So it has to be something that a teacher sees the impact, sees sees what's happening with a child, sees that effect, and then goes on and advocates themselves. Then once you've got a sort of enough people in that, then leadership can get involved, can move with that resonance, provide training. The training is quite intense. It's like a 3-day workshop to really get to understand this approach. And then that needs follow up afterwards as well, with refreshers and many things like that. So it's a real commitment. And it gradually grew and it got to the point where there were enough people involved that was like, we could actually have a leader from that group within that particular school who can then take it on and do more of that. So, and then we included parents, which was really important. Even though it was COVID, they started our online parent workshops, but now delighted to say they're face-to-face. The first time we asked for parents' involvement, we had 152 parents sign up within 3 hours of it going live. We have never seen a response like that. It's because parents are concerned about the world they see their children in and the world their children are growing into. They see the divisions created by social media. They see the environmental impact that the children are going to have to deal with. They see that, and they want a school, hopefully the school they've chosen, to doing something about it, advocating in that area. And so I think that's part of it. So it's been better implementation the third time round. It's been better, but only because I think I've really had to change my approach to how you change culture. And when I think back, the foolishness I had was that I wasn't actually applying compassionate systems tools to the implementation of compassionate systems, which was very foolish because I believed in it, but then didn't use that method to actually grow it in the organization. I think I made a better stab of it this third time round, but I'll let other people answer that question.
Oh no! Thank you for your honesty as well. I mean, we always learn from the processes of things that we're doing. So it's great to hear your learning journey there. And I guess when you're judging success of the framework, what do the success factors look like?
Yes, another excellent question. Thank you, because that's where we're at right now, is thinking about, okay, what are our measurable impacts here? What are our measurable impacts on the framework? And what's happened in the interim is that many of these practices have come into the adult part of the college. So we're now using these tools in adult meetings, adult strategizing sessions, those sorts of things, as well as classroom. So when we look at impact, we're thinking about impact college-wide on everything from a business support department through a team meeting, a college leadership team meeting, to what's happened in the classroom with the children. So a lot of the data around it being a more compassionate culture to work in and a compassionate culture to learn in, a lot of that comes through from regular surveys. In the adult context, it's annual. We have surveys for our parents and for our teachers. So a lot of it comes from the questions around how do you feel you belong? Do you feel your voice is heard, for example, in meetings and things like that? For students, they do twice a year, in fact, something called the PASS survey, which is not about what they're learning, it's about how they feel in school and how they feel connected to the community and to their learning and those pieces. So I'm monitoring those aspects very carefully to look for indicators that it's becoming a more compassionate, inclusive culture and an institution on the whole. In terms of the academic successes, we're particularly looking for those parts of academic assignments that are focused on the conceptual assessment. For our own assessments, certainly in Dux and Junior School, we have a lot of flexibility there, and we're actually assessing or looking for conceptual understanding. So for those ones, it's really quite, it's easy for us to have a look and see whether the skills of students are improving over the last sort of 2 to 3 years. Further up in the school, the IB, definitely their assessment practices are fully conceptual. We're looking closely, because GCSEs are a little bit behind as an assessment framework for the conceptual side of things, but they're coming along nicely now in terms of noticing that it's not about content now, it's about trying to look at getting kids to show the systemic thinking that they can apply to a history essay, a computer science question, whatever it happens to be. And so what we're doing there is being very specific about what elements within those qualifications we're monitoring to look for impact. So, but again, because it's a new, we recognize our limitations. If this was assessment for learning, that has been front and center in educational research for 25 years. The different approaches of AFL and all of the other bits and pieces, they're research grounded. There's evidence there. And we pride ourselves on being evidence-based. So therefore, we've got to apply the compassionate systems framework exactly the same, with exactly the same approach. So we are developing, and MIT and the Center for Systems Awareness are particularly helping there in terms of having an academic, rigorous background to some of the practices. So that's where we really do benefit from being part of a global project, which includes some really some big organizations, some big projects in America and Canada, Save the Children Fund, Médecins Sans Frontières, lots of organizations that are involved with some of the practices are helping to bring about ways of measuring it, if you like. But my interest, of course, is educational. So how do we measure the impact educationally? But as deputy head of college, I also have to look at the adults in the building. I have to be responsible for the adults in the building and whether they find that this is a compassionate place to work, etc. So that's why we're sort of applying some of that assessment to the adults in the building as well.
Super. Jacob, this has been a fabulous conversation. Really good to hear about the framework and the impact it's having on the lives of the future generation and creating those global citizens that are fit for business. And if there are opportunities for us to talk more closely with the likes of Dulwich College Singapore and the other international schools as well around helping to sort of connect the future generation with business and industry, very, very happy to have that. Thank you so much for sharing your programs with us today.
Thank you. I really enjoyed that conversation. I appreciate the questions, Damon.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the British Chambers podcast. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe, and why not leave us a rating and review on Spotify, Apple, Google, and the other podcast platforms. For more information, please visit our website at www.britcham.org.sg and tune in next time for a brand new episode.